Hello, welcome to another episode of
Inside the Message.
I'm Rev René. This
I'm
is
Brother
T.
Yes.
And together we are True Thought Spiritual Community along with you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. What we do at Inside the Message is we kind of have a conversation. We take a deep dive in the inspirational message that was delivered that week. And this week, Tony, Brother T, gave the inspirational message, and it was called The Fear of Forgiveness. And so if you had to encapsulate the main message that you wanted to communicate to our audience, what would that be?
Well, I think the most important thing I'd like to say is that forgiveness is a very difficult thing. It's a very difficult topic to even discuss, because it comes with, let's go back to the foundation of why anything would need to be forgiven. And it's because somebody has been judgeful, maybe self-righteous. Maybe somebody thinks that their idea of the way people should behave or should do or whatever, we have certain morals, values, and we said these are the way things should be. And if people get outside that description of what's allowable and accepting, then those people are guilty. They've sinned, or they are committed a crime or whatever. And so the first thing that comes into play is judgment. Okay. And judgment is only from the egoic thought system. Think about that. Now, I talked about two different thought systems, and I talked about how our mind is really split. I just want to preface this conversation by saying it's impossible for us to be possessed. All the horror stories about being possessed by, other entities, and I mean that's nonsense. You cannot be possessed. In fact, God is not possessing you. Right?
I'm not sure what that has to do
Well,
with
because some people are afraid that if we embark on a conversation that you're not alone, that there's another aspect of you that's available to you that is the principle of truth, right? And that's the self that doesn't judge at all. That's why that self knows that there's really no need for forgiveness. And so it can look upon whatever's going on in the world and see only pure innocence. But some people can be a little frightened about this level of conversation because they've been indoctrinated into the idea of being possessed and not being able to, have their own will, or being overpowered by some other entity or being, and that's absolutely not true. This is the voice of truth, and it's been with us all along, but we have to literally get ourselves out of the way in order for it to be expressed and to be heard through us and by us. And so I just wanted to say that this is one of the reasons that forgiveness is complicated, because it goes back to the foundation of our entire thought system, and if you will, what thought system are we giving value to, and what thought system are we operating from? So if I'm operating from traditional thinking about forgiveness, and if you've ever struggled with forgiveness, I understand that. I've struggled with forgiveness my whole life before I began to understand that the mind that is the judging mind is never really going to be able to forgive, because it believes its judgments are real.
Right. And so that aspect of ourselves, that judgmental, opinionated aspect of self, will ever only dig into their positionality. And even when there is the desire to forgive, the fear comes into play, because the fear of being wrong, the fear of that if I forgive, it means that I was somehow wrong.
Well, or that I'm not being honest about what I think. In other words, guilt.
Oh, you mean you're forgiving because you think you should forgive?
You're forgiving because you're people
so
pleasing,
it's not genuine,
or you're actually satisfying somebody else's wishes or desires. But if you say that somebody's done something outside the boundary of what you believe is acceptable, you're going to judge. That mind is going to judge the others for it, whatever that event is, and it's not going to just say, "Okay, I'm just going to wipe the slate clean," because its whole premise is whatever happened is real, and judgment is appropriate because what happened was outside the boundaries of what is acceptable.
So in our teaching, to judge is outside of the scope of our authority. that we really don't have
Absolutely.
and we're talking to project a judgment upon another. We're
Right.
not talking about spiritual discernment. We're talking about judging another as wrong in any way. And that we don't really have the quote unquote right to do that.
And the reason,
Go ahead.
Well, the reason we don't have the right to do that is because there's no way that we have enough information to know why somebody would be doing what they're doing anyway.
Right.
And all the things that came into play in their mind for them to do that, right? Everybody is basically operating from the position that they believe they're doing the right thing.
Right.
Everybody justifies everything that we do. We all justify everything we do. In the moment, we can look back and say, "Oh, I wish I hadn't done that." But in that moment, it made sense.
So the mind of fear, the separated mind, the egoic mind, is not really capable of forgiveness, of lasting, true forgiveness. And so, what is real forgiveness? What is true forgiveness?
Well, true forgiveness then is to set aside and move beyond or transcend that judgmental mind, which is the personality self. Mm-hmm. The self that was said, this is the story, the I that I've made myself to be, all about who I am, what I am, and who I present myself to be, etc. As a human, body, mind person, right? That persona, what I believe I am, is all made up ideas.
So what is real forgiveness?
Real forgiveness is to move beyond that thinking self and connect with the true self. It's been called the Holy Spirit. It's been called your right mind. It's been called capital S self, capital T self, right? Authentic self. It's, we can give it all kinds of names, but that mind, that thinking of mind, or the thoughts of that mind are only thoughts of innocence. It doesn't judge anything. It sees beyond the appearance of what's happening and sees what's beyond it is the divinity. It sees what's beyond it is what God has created us to be. And the things that we're playing out, just like the things we do at night in a dream, they're just pretend. They're just imaginary. Right. And we could hold somebody guilty in our dream tonight, last night, and then, okay, I'm going to go back in there tonight and hold that person guilty and judge them and put them in jail. Well, that sounds ridiculous. Number one, because you wake up and realize you were just dreaming. So this experience and how we see this world through that thinking personality self tends to think that this is real, right? We've convinced ourselves of that, but quite convincingly, we're convinced. And so that's how we participate in this experience, is through that thinking mind that we've created. So forgiveness is a tough concept because it means that we literally need to set aside our best thinking. We need to set aside our judgments. We need to set aside our belief that there's a good and a bad, an evil and a good, or whatever name you want to give it, and it moves us back, or requires us to move back from being committed to that thinking process, that mind that can be actually quite self-righteous, and it's confident that it's accurate and its thoughts are real, and stepping back from that and asking for guidance from our heart. Because that other self literally resides within the center of our being. We call it the heart of ourself.
Right. So it sounds like it requires taking a breath and pausing. It requires humility, that I just may not know of my own self what to do or how to do this. And then going into that holy instant of joining in the heart and mind of God and asking God to forgive through me. Not that God forgives, but it gives me that thought of God, the thought of love gives me the ability then to be forgiving, truly forgiving.
Right.
Is that
correct?
I
mean, and you can call it God, absolutely. But you can also look at it as, a voice of wisdom within you.
Yeah.
right? You have a guidance system. You
Mm-hmm.
have a voice of true wisdom within your heart.
And so that guidance system would tell me that if I'm not feeling good about it, if I'm not feeling complete, if I keep picking it back up, I haven't truly forgiven, or, of my own self, I'm not able to do that. And I just offer it to spirit, offer it to that divine intelligence to inspire my heart so that I can be forgiving. And truly, I'm never really bestowing forgiveness on somebody else anyway, am I?
No.
Okay.
No. And in fact, if we think that we're failing at forgiving other people, then we judge ourselves.
Right.
And so now we can't forgive ourselves for not forgiving them.
Mm-hmm.
We love somebody dearly, and they might do something, as people often do, that upsets us or hurts somebody else that we're close to. Mm-hmm. And we've heard the term, look, I'll forgive you, but I'm not going to forget what you did. Well, that's not forgiveness. You're still holding them in judgment at the very center of your being. You're saying they're wrong, I'm right. And I'm going to say out loud to the world, so that I look like I'm an okay person, that I'll forgive you. Mm-hmm. I ain't forgetting it. And I'm going to hold you guilty, period. Mm-hmm. And the reason it's such a tough thing is because then we guilt ourselves out, we judge ourselves if we feel like we're failing at forgiveness, especially around people that we really love and cherish.
Right.
And now suddenly a rift has come up and we just can't move behind. And we all know how uncomfortable that feels, to be really so close to somebody and so connected with somebody, and then something comes up and you feel separated from them, and there's such a disconnect.
Right. Yeah. I know that I've had that experience over the last 6 months to year on political conversations where, there are individuals who I love, who I care about, and we have been caught up in the polarity of what is going on, what's being mirrored actually in our political system. And that if you don't agree with me, it's like,
I can't be with you.
I can't be with you, right? And where I've been practicing going with that is who am I to judge another for their perspective, for their opinions, and how do I even know that mine is right? Of course, some would say it isn't right, and there we are. We're in that right and wrong, and so really. What I got from the conversation is that forgiveness is really an inside job. It really begins with ourselves. And that we're really simply, you gave a great definition of forgiveness as going back before we give a judgment. And so within my own mind, my own consciousness, with the help of my divine right mind, I just go back before I gave a judgment. And I realize I can even go back and see where my judgment, I'm forgiving myself just for judging another. That's all I'm doing. And when I do that, I'm seeing my own innocence.
Yeah, that's
and when I see my own innocence, I can then see the innocence of another. Yeah. And today's lesson was we do a daily podcast of A Course in Miracles lessons. Today was lesson 41, and it was God goes with me wherever I go. And that God goes with me as I approach forgiveness. That I'm not alone in
having to pull that off.
Right, yeah. Right. Yeah. So I guess we're kicking off a conversation, really. And how you kicked it off was that there are two thought systems, which we've been talking about. Mind of fear, the mind of love. The thought system, let's just call it a thought system of love and a thought system of fear. There's really only one mind. And how we make use of it, where we give our attention and focus to, is telling.
Very.
For our experience. So we get to choose, and the forgiveness that emanates from the different thought systems are very different. And that's what I got from your message in particular, and that we're all doing the best that we can. And so it's a very gracious approach. It's a very forgiving approach.
Well,
it's not punishing. It's
taking judgment out of the whole picture, because if we're just going to take our judgment from something else or someone else and put it on ourselves, because now we're feeling like we're not being who we want to be, or we're not expressing how we really think. We're trying to manipulate how we're perceived or how the other person's perceived, et cetera, whatever. Then we're just turning the judgment back on ourselves. So we're caught in a loop.
Right.
And it can last for a lifetime.
Right.
It can last for
and
a
then
lifetime.
something that I feel inspired to talk about this coming Sunday's message, which is, Valentine's Day, and the idea of, self-love, really. Because I was, having been raised Catholic and going to confession, and you have noticed this in our relationship, that the way that we teach, we can then sometimes turn within ourselves and be judging ourselves.
Very harshly.
Right. And that doesn't help either. Right. Because then I'm judging myself, and then I'm closed down, and I'm guilty, and all of that. And so,
and Valentine's Day is a great example, because we've been conditioned by our society that on Valentine's Day, we're supposed to do certain things for people. And if we don't do those things, we're not being loving.
Right.
We're not worthy of their love.
Right. And
we're guilty. And so a lot of the guilt and a lot of the whole idea of forgiveness is built on guilt. All of the guilt is ingrained in how we have been conditioned in this experience, and how we expect to be treated, and how we expect that we should be treating each other. And those are all false concepts. I mean, if you're upset on Valentine's Day because somebody in your life didn't treat you the way you thought you should be treated, that's where the work's at.
And that's never happened at all to either one of us.
I think it did happen once or twice. And I'm not good at those things sometimes personally, because I try to actually move away from the conditioning of the world.
Exactly.
And it leaves me hanging sometimes, because all those conditions are still there, like buying presents for people at Christmas and things like that. We have all these rules.
But the point is that it's a false construct.
It's a way for us to be
and to guilt each other, and right. So clearly we've just kind of scratched the surface.
Right. And you're going to speak about that on Valentine's Day, right?
I am.
So I'm looking forward to that.
I am too. And I'm looking forward to unpacking this more with you in our conversation, which will begin at 7:00. No, 7:30.
7:30 tonight on the Zoom, if you want to join us on our Zoom session.
Yeah, join us on the Zoom. You can join our email list at truethought.org. And when you do that, you will receive a weekly email, which will have the Zoom link on it. And we would love for you to join us. We have great conversations, and we are actually going to focus on this topic, the fear of forgiveness. Have you ever felt the fear of forgiveness? And we're going to discuss the two aspects, the two ways of looking at forgiveness.
Right.
And anything else that you would like to add?
No, I think that's a lot.
Yeah, so
that's
great message. Again, thank you so much. And I love you. And I love you. And we'll see you soon. Thank you for joining us.
Have a blessed weekend.